I've been on the road for way too long, following the rules. I fall behind and wonder why you've been down the road. It doesn't matter where you go. I saw your face light up the ways I've never known. And all at once I felt my fears letting me go. Tell me how you got to where you are, I wanna know. In time you said you'll know when you know.
I've been healing wounds. I had fallen down before like you used to have my scars.
All right, my name is Jason, guys. I'm your host for today's show, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the Brand Identity Design Business Podcast. I have been doing this for almost 1.5 years. We are currently on season 4. We will be wrapping up season 4 by October 11, 2023, and I would be starting season 5 from January 5th onwards. I'm not exactly sure whether it's going to be January 5th, but it's going to start in January for sure. I'm going to take a 2-month break because it's hectic and exhausting to do this week on week. Okay, but it's actually fun because you can learn a lot of interesting things through the process. So, I actually wanted to make a few announcements. I actually wanted to give a shout out because I had the opportunity to look at the analytics of my podcast. I wanted to actually give a shout out to some of the people who have been from specific locations who have been really, really supporting the show, especially from North America. So I want to give a shout out to people, my fans listening from Virginia, Pennsylvania, California, New Jersey, Oregon, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, New York, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, Georgia, DC, Indiana, Kentucky, New Mexico, Kansas, Missouri, South Carolina, Minnesota, Utah, Maryland, Michigan, Delaware, and the list goes on and on. And you guys would not actually believe the analytics states that 72% of my listeners are actually women. So shout out to all those wonderful ladies who are out there, who are entrepreneurs, who feel supported and appreciated for the content I have been generating. And thank you so much for your love and support. So I wanted to actually get into the interview today, and I have somebody really exciting who I have interviewed on season 1. His name is Just Sturgis, and he's a wellness veteran. He has 30 plus years of experience in the wellness industry. So today's topic is building a sustainable spa. You might have heard about building a spa. Now imagine building a sustainable spa. What are the challenges and solutions? And this podcast, it doesn't matter, if you're an entrepreneur or no, if you are an industry professional in general, or a wellness enthusiast, or simply curious about the future of luxurious, eco-friendly relaxation, this podcast event is going to promise you, it's going to help you broaden your horizons, gain practical knowledge, and inspire you by the success story of Just Sturgis and the things which he was able to accomplish over the course of time, bringing harmonious synergy between the pursuit of well-being and the well-being of our planet. So meet Just Sturgis, a seasoned ideator, a business strategist with over 36 years of experience in the realm of spa, wellness, hospitality design and development. Just work, includes brand building, conceptual strategy, advisory services, business development for some of the world's most successful brands. Now, Just portfolio, and if anybody is interested in actually seeing Just portfolio, please reach out to him directly or me. His portfolio features over 178 successful spa projects involving collaboration with 37 international brands across 33 diverse countries. Among these partners, some prominent names are such as Disney, Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, the Ritz-Carlton, Jumeirah Hotels and Resorts, Zulal, and many others have really stood out. So I wanted to personally say just thank you so much for the opportunity, for accepting my proposal to once again be a guest from your busy schedule. I know it's very challenging, but you were able to make it. Let's have some virtual noise. Let's welcome Just Sturgis to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. It's great to be back with you. I see some familiar faces actually in the audience, some people I've worked with.
That's really lovely to know. Give them a shout out. Who are you referring to? I see a lot of people.
Well, I work with Cheryl, I work with Leah, I work with Giovanni. I think I saw Sylvia here earlier. So, some good folks that I've worked with through the years on different projects and in different ways.
Well, shout out to all of you folks. If you are interested in coming up on stage when we start Q&A, please do not hesitate. This is a very friendly show. You guys will have fun. And I'm going to be learning a lot of interesting things from just today. So I have a jam-packed this interview with a lot of fun and interesting questions. So just the first thing which I would like to ask you is about the sustainable spa. How does sustainable spa contribute to the overall sustainability goal of a hospitality establishment? And I don't even know if there is a goal. What is the goal, like, of an establishment? Can you
Sure.
enlighten me with this insight?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the awareness and education are probably the biggest areas of impact where a spa can kind of affect the overall hospitalities industry push toward sustainability. Especially when you look at the broader idea of wellness and spa, there's sort of this perceived correlation between alternative healing and sustainability and environmental practices and connection with nature. It's a bit more expected and accepted, when you read or have dialogue or see these types of elements of sustainability or environmental practices or notions in relation to spa than it is in relation to hotels or resorts. Although that's definitely changing. It doesn't feel out of place or contrived when you start to bring up those topics or when you have initiatives that are in a spa or a wellness center, because again, it starts to correlate with kind of the underlying ideology of a spa, right? That kind of healing perspective. And I think that's changing with hotels, and there's these different types of experiences that travelers are starting to look for, and I think they're connecting more to the ecology and the environment and the local experiences when they're traveling, and so that's starting to influence even more how hotels and resorts approach this. And again, I think spas offer an interesting gateway into that because there is that sort of innate correlation. Um, I think also the spa and wellness industry we're focused on achieving kind of optimum levels of health. And we look at things from a holistic standpoint, not just internally in our own bodies, but it sort of extends to the world around us. And that again connects to this kind of environmental and sustainability type mindset.
I appreciate you sharing that. For me, this is an entirely new subject. I don't even know anybody else who is doing what you're doing, at least in my circle of connection. So this is pretty interesting. So I like to deep dive more. Now, see the industry, not the industry, but I'm just saying the institution or the organization, whoever is offering spa or the hotel, for an example, right? They are aware of the sustainability goals. How do they ensure that the staff in the sustainable spa are well trained and aligned with these goals? And how does the role of staff education would play in the process?
Well, it's been a while since I've been directly responsible for a staff. I know many of my peers who are much better at training and mentoring line staff in general spa operations. And specifically when you're talking about day-to-day sustainability practices. But in my role, which is more on the development end, it's about creating brand stories and design elements that make it easy for teams to recognize and share the ties to sustainability and ecological practices. It's about making ecology and sustainability intuitive and recognizable without going overboard or being too in your face about it. And this allows teams to feel comfortable sharing those elements, those stories, and describing how things tie into that philosophy. And if I do my job well, then the leaders in those spas are able to educate their staff, and the brand elements and the design features that we've created are easily recognizable, and they're interesting enough for the staff to want to share and learn about. And so I don't directly, I think, have an influence over training the staff on how to present sustainability as a goal, or how to work toward that. But my role is more about setting up these facilities so that they are in a position that the operators can easily do so.
Yeah, I appreciate you making me understand your role and what you're doing at this moment. So I appreciate that clarity. My next question would be within regards to the challenges a spa owner or a developer, or you as a developer, would face when building a sustainable spa. And how do you think these challenges differ from traditional spa development?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of perspectives on that. There are a couple of stages to it. There's the development and there's the operations. From a development perspective, there are some real challenges that developers and owners face when they're trying to build a spa sustainably. Implementing sustainable practices and investing in eco-friendly technologies and materials often can have a higher upfront cost, and that could pose financial constraints on the project, or perceived obstacles even. And especially when you're looking at it from an ROI perspective, there's not a lot of easily recognizable return when you're talking about exchanging a sustainable method or a sustainable product for a traditional product. So getting those stakeholders to recognize sustainability as a long-term investment that could yield cost savings over time, or that could benefit them from a brand perspective, that can be tricky, and it's kind of hard to prove that case. Additionally, a lot of those products, or what we call products, the developments themselves, are short-term investments. So they might be a 3 or 5 year flip where a REIT or somebody has bought the property and they're injecting some renovations or some enhancements to improve the value or perceived value of the asset, and then they're going to sell it. And in those cases, they're going to be really hesitant to spend additional money on something that might appear extraneous, like a sustainable method or product or material. And so again, that's a little bit of a challenge in getting them to see the benefit of that, especially if they don't plan on holding on to the asset for a long time. Regulatory compliances are still a challenge. I mean, we're still new in this. It seems like people have been talking about sustainability forever, at least since the 70s, but really in practice, it's not all that common. So we still face challenges in certain locations where they're not quite familiar with maybe a process or a method or a philosophy, like a gray water system or something like that. And so now you're convincing that municipality of the effectiveness or the safety of that sustainable method. And there's ways to overcome that. There's a lot of environmental organizations and different sustainability consultants can help you convey those messages and kind of get that across. And then probably the last or another area where it's a challenge is just the availability of sustainable products, materials, and processes. Again, we're such at an early point in all of this that it's not something that's readily available, at least not as readily available as traditional methods. And so sometimes there's a lot of effort put into research and finding those alternatives. And that's from the development side. Operationally, there's a lot of hurdles as well. And one of those is just the nature of spa, how it's evolved over time. So, there's things like a lot of water consumption is a big concern in most spas, right? Guests taking long showers. We have hydrotherapy amenities. We have water features. The amount of laundry alone for towels and linens and those types of things is substantial. There's a lot of energy consumption as well. So HVA systems and lighting and energy intensive equipment. So all of those things, are affecting our carbon emissions. So it's a process operationally to start to exchange out some of the traditional items for some of the more sustainable items. Um, and then really the hidden issue in all of this is the carbon emissions, because it's very difficult to determine what that is. And everything that we buy and we source, if it's coming from another place, if it's created in another place, those all have a carbon footprint that we have to deal with.
Wow, I had no idea this involves so many components and things. So many. Wow. Wow. This is super cool. While you're explaining it, this is super cool because you're focusing on really things in a very wide aspect. My listeners, who are listening to us on LinkedIn, just in case if you're not aware, there's actually a share button at the bottom of the screen. If you click on that, you should be able to either send it as a message to any of your close friends whom you feel would benefit from the conversation. Please invite them, or else you can just post it on your feed so that my guests would have a better reach and we would be able to share and spread the message we are trying to spread today. I want to build up on some of the things which you just said, because you said from things from the development point of view, and as well as from an operational point of view. So you said that there's not really a lot of ROI when it comes to the spa, to getting into this eco-friendly whole thing, and on top of that, it's you not even sure that what kind of carbon footprint those eco-friendly resources would have in a nutshell. So is the hospitality sector, is the spa sector moving because they were forced to move, or was it just voluntarily because you want to make some sort of an environmental impact based on the consumptions which you just highlighted: water consumption, hydrotherapy, a lot of laundry which is created in the process, energy consumption, a lot of things which are affecting this. So is this a voluntary
Mhm.
step has been taken by the industry as a whole?
I think it's a little of both. I would say more often than not that there's pressure to move that direction. The consumers are changing. There's a lot of knowledge that's out in the world that didn't used to exist in terms of how we affect the planet, and what our footprints are, both personally and in the companies and places that we support. And, when you see a lot of these hotel flags, especially kind of permeating areas of the world that may have been less developed. You start seeing places like in remote Mexico where nobody was, and all of a sudden there's a number of resorts cropping up. That's going to have an impact not only on the social aspect of those locations, but also physically, the resources that they're using. The if you're building a building, you're displacing most likely some type of nature, whether it's a rainforest or trees or a farm or what have you. And so I think there's a pressure that's grown from the consumer on most companies in most industries to start being a little more conscious of what we're doing. And then there's some thought leaders within the various industries that are also kind of propelling that forward. People that are thoughtful of the environment and of the resources that we have, and the fact that they're probably not infinite, and we have to start um, kind of thinking about how things move forward from this point. What are the resources that we're going to continue to have? What resources can we regenerate, and what do we have to save?
That makes absolute sense. Now you did mention in one of my previous question about there's a demand by guests itself to move towards or focus towards sustainability. So I wanted to understand now, since you're in the development sector, how do guests respond to the sustainable focus spas in your personal experience, and what is their satisfaction level like? Because I'm assuming they are paying quite a premium to have this experience. Okay, and if you're not offering them the same amount of luxury experience, and if things move to eco-friendly, I'm not saying that eco-friendly can't be luxurious. Okay, that's not the point. But do you see kind of a conflict, or do you see any sort of issues, or are they responding more positively? Is there any sort of benefits, unexpected benefits or positive outcomes you have personally witnessed by doing these sustainable efforts?
A few questions in there. Yeah. Well, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of an innate correlation between spa and wellness and what your intention is when you go to one of these places, sort of whether it's relaxation or healing or just kind of resetting your health. There's a bit of a correlation between that and then how people approach the environment and ecology and how we're connected to nature and those types of things. So I think you're sort of predisposed. If you're coming to a spa, you're maybe predisposed a little bit more to be accepting of some ecological initiatives and things like that. But to answer another point you made, ecology and ecological choices and sustainability definitely don't they're not oppositional to having a luxurious or a really comfortable experience. In fact, there's plenty of ways to make those coexist really naturally. And honestly, even things like having a facility that maybe didn't have any outdoor connection previously and injecting that's an enhancement, that's an upgrade. And so sometimes doing these things actually makes the experience better. I think also, and I get this from back years ago when I worked with Whole Foods, and they were kind of a thought leader in the space of organics and things like that. And what we gained from our customers then was they are all on board with participating in whatever initiatives make the world better, but most of them don't want to make the effort on their own or take the first step. And so if you kind of set up your business to do that on their behalf, you sort of give them permission to come in and sort of ride your coattails, if you will, right? If we're a sustainable spa and they have a choice between ours and another one, they can choose ours and feel like they're contributing to the efforts of the ecology without doing much other than making that choice between one and the other. I think a lot of consumers have that mindset, and that's one area where creating all of these initiatives and building a brand that is focused on sustainability, you're going to capture that segment of the population, and that's going to continue to grow.
That makes perfect sense. I appreciate you clarifying that, making me understand this. Is super cool. All right, so I want to actually speak to you and ask you a question with regards to the approach you would use when it comes to selection of material and design to ensure sustainability without compromising on guest experience. What is your approach like? What kind of materials do you generally opt in when you do the design process? Help my listeners understand.
Sure. This is a big challenge, and it's different in every project at every location. It's based on availability, and in some of those locations that are remote or maybe on an island, it could be that it's just too expensive to get some materials and what have you. And so I think you focus on what can you do, whether that's full throttle, everything is sustainable, or it's just little points of impact here and there. It's a lot about exchanges. I think you heard me say that word a few times, but that's really where you focus, is the exchanges, because you're still trying to accomplish a specific design. And so when you look at that, you're looking at the materials that you would normally use, and is there a better option in some way? And in what way is that a better option? You kind of have to vet that. But, for example, you could utilize materials that are recyclable or that have a dual lifespan, things like hardwoods that, even if it outlives the lifespan of the facility that it's in, it could be repurposed somewhere else. There's things that are more ecologically sensitive that people might not think of, like stainless steel is actually typically more ecologically friendly than lumber. You can use things like bamboo and hemp that have a really rapid growing cycle and that are useful in a number of different products, from flooring to wood replacement to plastic replacement, can even replace concrete in some situations. So I think there's a lot of different materials that are available to us. It's just about kind of pushing people to look for exchanges. And that's really a role like mine as a consultant. Um, that's on me to get with those designers and those architects and those construction teams and point out where we have opportunities to do something different than what we've normally done.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, so either you can do it like full throttle, make go 100% sustainable, or sometimes you can do it in bits and pieces. It all depends upon accessibility and availability of those resources. So I appreciate you helping us understand, and I appreciate all the things which you said about alternatives like stainless steel, bamboo. Those things can really help you to have that sustainable approach, cost effective, very easy to recycle. So these are nice tips. I appreciate just you sharing that. I wanted to acknowledge my good friend Leslie who has joined the conversation. She is a sustainable freak. So just I wanted to introduce you offline to her. She might invite you on your
Excellent.
podcast as well. So if you do, please do not hesitate. She's a very cool friend of mine and you will love to be on her show. All right. So my next question to you would be with regards to what kind of advice you would like to give to spa owners who are looking forward to implement sustainability to their existing business model.
Sure. Again, I think there's some conditions there. Is it a full renovation? Is it a new build? Is it an operational facility that just wants to inject some sustainable practices or initiatives? For those that are renovating, I think what you're trying to achieve, you look at, you figure out what that budget is that you're wanting to work with, and then you need to work with somebody reputable, whether it's a spa consultant or an architect or designer that's done sustainable design before, and you start to figure out, like I said earlier, what those exchanges might be that still gets you to where you want to be in terms of that design. If it's a new build, it's the same kind of process. You're really looking at where you want to be 5 years from now as well, right? How is this design going to hold up, stand up? The choices that you make today, is there a return on those? And then if you're really just looking to add some elements of sustainability or some practices in an operation that's already there, I think there's a lot of opportunities, or I should say a lot of resources for that, whether it's even the simple Google research. But there's things like the Green Spa Network. There are other associations and lots of professionals out there that could help kind of lead you into small changes that you could make. If one example is maybe you go from using a typical terry cloth towel to more of a Turkish cotton type towel. Those towels dry faster, they wear longer, they're typically more organic in nature. And so just that one change could have a tremendous impact on multiple areas. So if it dries faster, you're using less energy. If it wears longer, you're throwing them out less often and exchanging for new ones. If it's gone through a more organic process of creation, then you're not putting, dyes and chemicals into the water supply during that process. So again, sometimes you can make one seemingly small change that will affect multiple areas of ecology.
That makes absolutely a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. I was wondering now if the spa owner decides to implement sustainability and if they decide to go ahead with full renovation, doing all those stuff, when you guys pop in to do the development aspect of things or educating them how to go about with the development of it, are there any sort of metrics or key performance indicators you would educate the spa owners with, that this is how you track and measure the sustainability practices of the spa over the course of time?
I mean, it's a great question. And it's a great thought. I'll be honest with you. There's really not a lot of existing opportunity to track KPIs for this particular focus. Having been an operator before, I can tell you that within the operation, you're definitely not going to have time or resources available to do something like that, to track what your ecological footprint is or your impact. It's just not really feasible within the operation. And so unless you're in a large facility or a big hotel flag that decides to make this a priority and have somebody kind of devoted to tracking those KPIs, it's just an unlikely activity at this point. Now, there's a few tools out there. There's things like Pair AI and I can't recall all of them. Greenly, Green Places. I think there's one called Supercritical. These are all third-party tools that are focused on kind of evaluating or rating a business's ecological attributes. And again, it's out there, but who's going to really be in charge of that? Who's going to be assigned to do that? How is it going to get paid for? All of those things. So while I think in the future, KPIs for sustainability will be a thing, right now it's not all that practical or available.
All right. All right. That makes sense. That makes sense. I understand. I completely understand. Now let's, when I was doing research about the subject matter of sustainability, I did encounter a few blogs which spoke about biodiversity. So, one of my favorite questions. So, why is biodiversity important in a spa environment, and how can it enhance the guest experience? If you could share some examples, that would be pretty cool.
Absolutely. I would say this is my favorite piece of this subject as well. I love the idea and the impact of biodiversity. It's something that's always been extremely important to me. When I start out on a project, especially if it's one that involves design or has a design element, I'm constantly looking for opportunities to connect with the environment that surrounds the facility. Obviously beyond biodiversity is impacted how all the things that we talked about today, the different products, materials, things, all of that are brought in from other locations, etc., how those impact the system. But when I'm doing a project, I'm really looking at the ecosystem directly surrounding the project. Everything I do, I try to approach it from a holistic framework. So how does what we're doing fit within the ecosystem that's going to surround us? What is our impact? Also, what can we utilize? What are our resources, and how do we simultaneously take advantage of the location and feed and nurture and grow that same location? So not just being an impact from a drain but standpoint, but also how are we feeding it and giving back? There's a lot of really challenging questions I love to dig into when I get those types of projects. And it doesn't have to be just projects in exotic resort locations. It could be urban impact as well. So, for example, in an urban setting, you might, maybe you're not necessarily figuring out how you don't displace wildlife or kill a field of wildflowers. But maybe you're trying to figure out, how do I not add more traffic congestion to my location? Or how do I figure out a way to embrace and tie the indoors to the outdoors in this urban location? Or maybe you're in a location where the air quality is really poor. How do I create this kind of cocoon inside my facility where you have filtered air and filtered water and sort of this purified environment that's a juxtaposition that's the surroundings outside? So there's a lot of different ways to think about it. I'll give you another really good example for this. I've done work all over the world and in some pretty dramatically different locations. And a few years ago, I worked on a project in Qatar, and it was in a location where at the time was very remote and undeveloped area of the country. And the work that was given to me was to create a very authentic and connected resort built upon the idea of wellness and family wellness. And I usually do my approaches to look at the environment along with the culture and the history and all of the elements that are going to go into the concept in some way. And that includes the location itself. And there were a lot of things that stood out to me when I started doing that research. Obviously all of the cultural and historical elements, and there was a lot to work with that. It looked like it was going to be a lot of fun in that way. But one thing that really stood out to me when I began looking into the flora and fauna that were native to Qatar, it sort of blew my mind. Qatar is home to just over 125 different animals and 370 plus species of flowering plants. Now, I don't know if that sounds like a lot to everybody listening, but by contrast, Costa Rica, where I've also done a lot of work, has over 200 species of mammals alone. Nearly 1,000 species of birds, 200 species of reptiles, more than 200 species of amphibians, 300,000 species of insects. And that's not even getting into the different plants and flowers and trees. So when you look at that and you think about Qatar, and they have 125 animals total that are native and 371 flowering plants total, this is a tiny amount. And that means this is a very fragile environment. And so there were a number of animals from that tiny list that were even on the endangered list. So when I start looking at that resort and how it was going to lay out and what it was going to include, I'm not focused on the number of massage rooms or the fact that we're going to build a clinic or what hydrotherapy can we bring to the desert. My first thoughts were, how can we take this coastal desert plot that feels pretty desolate and barren and that doesn't have a lot of native resources to pull in? How do we make that a paradise? And some of the things that I looked at was historically date palms were a really important tree in Qatar, but over time they started to diminish. And so I thought, we have this opportunity. Why don't we create a new date palm grove on this resort and sort of bring that prominent tree and then back into this kind of mini paradise that we're building? And then I thought, well, if we're doing that, we need to water it right. What if we create a gray water area where we could create this sort of wetlands? And now that's going to bring back some of the birds that have left, because again, there's nothing here. And so we start going down and peeling back those layers. Then I think, well, we need pollinators to help kind of propagate all of this. So maybe we do a bee apiary as well. And so you see, you can just start adding on these little elements that are not only having a ecological impact, but you can imagine from a guest standpoint how cool a lot of these things would be, especially when you're driving from Doha up to this resort and there's nothing along the way but sand. And suddenly you come to this oasis and there's all of these elements, and then into the design itself, we integrated a lot of different gardens and things. And so again, those pollinators are going to play a role in that. And then you have new insects and you have new lizards and amphibians, and mammals start to come back. You have birds that come back. And so it just creates this biodiverse environment that used to be native, that's gone away, and now we're trying to bring it back. And that resort's called Zulal Wellness, by the way. It's operated by a company called Shiva Som, and I spent many years working on that project. It's probably one of my favorite projects, and it turned out pretty incredible and very much like I described it. Hopefully that wasn't too long of a ramble.
You know what? It sounded really cool. It sounded really, really cool. And I appreciate you sharing that whole experience. So typically when you do a project, Just, how long does it last? Like, how long does it take for you to develop the whole thing, execute, doing a handover, and telling them this is how it's supposed to be, carried over ahead, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it just really depends on the scope of the project. Most of the time, developers or owners are not necessarily investing that much time, effort, and money. A lot of times it's just a renovation, or it's a new addition or a new build, but on a smaller scale, or sort of on a little bit more, I don't know how to put it, but it's not necessarily a big investment. Most of the time, people are not investing that much time, effort, and money. A lot of times it's just a renovation, or it's a new addition or a new build, but on a smaller scale, or sort of on a little bit more, I don't know how to put it, but it's not necessarily a big investment. typical or traditional scale, and then occasionally we get these big projects like the one I just described. So I've done probably 7 of those in my career, out of nearly 200 projects. So you can see that most of the time you're talking a few months, maybe 8 months or a year on a typical new build. And then you have these other outliers like Zulal or Joali Being or some of these others that I've worked on that are 2, 3, 4 year process where you're developing everything, not just the design, but everything about that product, all of the story, the reasoning, you're tying everything together. And so there's a lot more involved. But on a typical project, I think I would say under a year in most cases. And if it's a renovation, it's probably a few months.
That is super cool. Now, when you were speaking about that biodiversity thing, you spoke about flora, fauna, reptiles, amphibians, and those kind of things, right? I'm just wondering, like, were you always fascinated with all these environmental things and things which makes the whole ecology and stuff like that? Is that what driven you to get into spa and make this happen, or is this something which you only do, you know, as your
No,
expertise?
I think there's a number of us. In fact, there's some folks on the watching right now that I know have this in their wheelhouse. I think for me, it's not so much ecology is sort of something that fell into what I love to do. And what I love to do is connect things. I like to know about relationships and how things work. Same with the body, right? And I think within in the spa realm, it's all about the person, the human. And so a lot of what we do there as well is figuring out how the systems of the body work. How do they work together? Why does it help when you touch this part of the body and the pain is in another part of the body? Same thing with this with design. How does it impact if I make this decision now? What does it mean 5 years from now, or even 5 minutes from now? And how does it relate to this? I love the process of designing a facility. For me, is about those connections. How do I move through a space? Does it make sense? Why does it not make sense? Who does it make sense for? So my mind is a little bit like a web. And if I get a little movement on one portion of the web, I feel it on another portion, and then I've got to run over there like the spider and figure out what's going there. And that kind of keeps me busy all day. I'm constantly running around figuring out what one connection might do to another, and whether that's a person, product, or place.
That is super cool. I love the way how you're trying to meet the dots. You're in this quest, you know, wherein you're trying to explore new things each and every day, and so diverse the universe is. So many magical things which happen day in and day out, which we barely notice sometimes, right? So that is super cool. I want to let the audience know that we will be opening up the space for Q&A. So if you are interested, please raise your hand. I would be happy to bring you up. I just have just two more questions before we move ahead with the break. I think I saw somebody raise their hand. Leslie, please go ahead, raise your hand. I will bring you up. All right, Cheryl, I'm going to bring you up. So the question which I want to ask you is actually from the intake form which you filled. Okay, two things. I asked you who has
Mhm.
been your biggest inspiration. You said it's not just one person, who stands out above everyone else. You said that my earliest inspiration was your grandmother, who taught me creativity, compassion, curiosity, and confidence. But from that point, I have been influenced and inspired by so many people, which I totally agree, because you have been worked with so many people, so many projects. You have met and interacted with a lot of people. But I'm mostly inspired by small acts of compassion, empathy, or creativity, especially when the giver thinks no one is watching. So I just wanted you to emphasize on this specific point, because that really stood out to me.
Hmm.
Help me understand, what do you mean by this? I know what it means, but I want to understand from your point of view.
Sure. Well, I think aside from what I said a minute ago about being really fascinated by connections, the other thing about me is I love observation. I could spend if I didn't have to earn a living, I would just go sit somewhere all day and observe things. I love observing interactions, um, and just kind of taking in new information. And so in doing that, and I do that a lot. I do it every day when I eat lunch. I do it when I travel, and so I'm watching what's going on around me, and there are so many times when I see these little acts, just like I said, of compassion or empathy or somebody being creative, uh, and it's just part of that person or those people's lives. They're not necessarily putting on a show or anything. That just has a huge impact on me because I can see kind of the process that's happened, whether that's somebody helping somebody up that just fell, or giving money to a homeless guy, or I saw a guy yesterday that had created his own backpack out of tape, and he's walking down the street here in St. Louis, and I don't know, it made me chuckle, right? He needed a backpack. He probably didn't have money for it. He created it out of duct tape. It was pretty cool. So just observing life and seeing all of these little kind of micro moments, I think those have a huge impact on how I do things and what I see.
That is super super awesome. So let's actually take a quick break. I want to give a shout out to my sponsor. I want you guys to understand who are listening. Doing this podcast week on week, it is an expensive process. Sponsorship does help to minimize some of those expenditures. So shout out to my sponsor, Carla Howard. If you want to see the details about my sponsor, it's actually mentioned on the event notes. Please have a listen to this recording.
Are you a professional speaker who has been dreaming about getting paid for the value that you deliver for your talks and workshops? If so, the Get Paid from the Stage program was created for you. During our 6 weeks together, I will give you all of the tools, templates, and guides you need to build a speaker package that will get you noticed. You'll learn the sweet spot for pricing your talk, how to negotiate with event organizers, and how to ask for additional value that you are missing out on. The next Get Paid from the Stage program starts on October 14th. Be sure to sign up soon because seats are limited to no more than 10 participants. Be sure to mention Jason's podcast when you register, and that will give you a 1-hour one-on-one with me at no additional cost. I can't wait to see you get paid from the stage.
So the voice which you heard, guys, that's by Carla Howard. She has been a guest on my show. She spoke about how to become a 5-figure speaker. She has shared priceless insights on that episode. I have the link to those episodes under the event notes. You should be able to find it. Please click on read more. You should be able to see it. I would highly encourage you to take advantage of the 6-week offer. It's not too expensive. She has some really cool insights on how you can make money right from the stage. So please do secure that spot. If you want to know more details, there is a registration link which is listed. The registration link is trackable. So when you click on it, that's how I come to know that you are taking advantage of it. Stuff like that. So anyways, moving on, let's actually start with Q&As. I want to welcome Cheryl and Leslie. So Cheryl, starting with you, this is the first time you have been on my podcast. I just want to let you know that this conversation is being recorded, and by being on stage, you're giving us consent to record you and use your voice as a part of my podcast, and there's no issue, stuff like that, etc. So Cheryl, how are you, and do you have a question, or would you like to contribute to this conversation?
Yes, thank you so much. Justin, I would like to hear what the initial conversation might sound like with owners, whether they are buy and hold owners or short-term ownership for a spa, what that sounds like, especially since water features are so in vogue right now. I got to believe that it's in the client's best interest to at least have that discussion about sustainable water. So what does that initial conversation sound like from both you and the client?
I knew Cheryl would give me a tough one. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be candid, it's been a long time since I've been on the initial on the initial conversation. A lot of times I'm coming in after some decisions have been made. I'm usually working with an architect and designer. And so I'm not necessarily getting the face time with that initial operator, or owner, or investor. But in the past, when we've had those conversations, I think part of my typical repertoire, my typical script is to ask about their stance on sustainability, whether that's brand wide or if it's just kind of a one-off project. What does that owner think? That's part of the questionnaire that I put out right from the beginning, so I can get the sentiment. And if there's really no answer to that, or they don't have any kind of stance on sustainability, I'll typically start to inject as we discuss the different elements of the property. So in the example you gave, if it's water features, if we're going to do some type of hydro circuit, or maybe they're doing a bathhouse concept, I'm going to start bringing it up in those initial conversations, both the pros and cons of these types of facilities, and then what are some of the opportunities. And those opportunities include making exchanges so that you're still getting the intent that you want as an owner or investor, but that we're being cognizant of things like not just ecologically, how does this impact, but also your costs, right? There's a lot of costs involved in these things as well. And so it's all part of that same conversation. I'm not trying to be evasive to your question, Cheryl, but I think I don't typically start out with that as a kind of core negotiation point or talking point. It's more woven into the overall conversation and discussion. So as we get to the different types of spaces that they're looking to create, or if I'm volunteering to them that I think they should have this, or this within their platform, I'm constantly in my mind thinking about the sustainable version of that. So it's just sort of a part of what I do. And I would say, if I'm being candid, I'm probably successful 15 to 20% of the time. And most of the time, the owners don't care and don't really want to talk about it. And so it's a process of, if I can find a sustainable alternative during the construction process that makes sense, that costs the same or less, I can usually push that through. But out at the front set or at the onset, most of these owners and developers are not there yet.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheryl, I don't mind you asking a follow-up question if you like to ask anything else, since we don't have too many audience.
Right. So just the follow-up that I was curious about, and Justin, you might not know this since your role has changed slightly over time, is, are we seeing owners more agreeable to sustainable features than over the past 10 years? If you know that, that's helpful.
Absolutely.
And not just lip service, but actually in making those investments. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think for most owners and developers, it's going to come back to investment. It's going to come back to ROI, even if it's not directly involving money exchange. They want to see something for that. And so sometimes the trick is on our end. We need to illustrate how this is going to have an ROI that may not be directly in terms of money or monetary gain, but is it going to position their facility in a better light and attract more consumers from different markets and those types of things? And I think that conversation is much more well received today than it was even 5 years ago. And then you have some of these market leaders, like the project I did in the Maldives, Jolly being, it was not a negotiation. It was demand that everything would be sustainable and ecologically cognizant. Part of that is because of the remote nature and where it was located, and the fact that you really need to be aware of your resources. But part of that was the ownership, who was Turkish, and they witnessed kind of firsthand sort of the challenges that their own communities in Turkey have had with ecological uh, obstacles and things. So I think there are definitely a lot more owners today who are aware of it, willing to put forth the effort. But like I said earlier, with the consumers, they want somebody to take the first step. They want somebody to put the process in front of them. They don't want to spend the effort doing that. So if you come to the table and you're prepared to talk about it, and you're prepared with all the facts and the details, and the reasoning and what the outcome you project would be, a lot of times they're fine. Let's just go for it. But if you come and you just present it as kind of a what if, and now it's the ball's in their court to do something to take that initiative, unlikely to happen.
All right, all right. I appreciate you answering that question which Cheryl asked. Cheryl, you're welcome to stay on stage. We might have something which involves like a group thing we might do in the next few minutes. So, anyways, I want to actually let the listeners know that, guys, if you are not following me and Just, I welcome you to click on our bio or click on our profiles on LinkedIn. Please give us a follow. It encourages us, inspires us to spread the message, do this thing repeatedly over and over again. If you do have access to the event notes, it's a three dots. If you click on that, it will take you to the event notes. On the event notes, you have links to my podcast. Please give my podcast a follow. It really helps with the analytics. By the end of this year, I aim to be on the top 20% in Spotify, according to Spotify's metrics, and I think I should be able to achieve it. We have seen a significant higher reach this year in comparison to the previous year. So please help me to achieve that goal. I would sincerely appreciate it. Now I want to say hi to Leslie. Leslie, I know you were in Hawaii. You had a very big break. Thank you so much for being a part of my podcast once again. Do you have a question you'd like to ask Just, or would you like to contribute to this conversation?
Yeah, hi, Jason, Justin, everybody here today taking time out of their day. Really fascinating what you're sharing today. Quick comment and question. Uh, First of all, you're a man after my own heart. My grandmother was my inspiration. She grew up on a farm in Naples, in Italy, and when she emigrated to this country, she really taught me how to live off the land, respect nature and animals. So it's so coincidental that I'm in the sustainable environment community and also an avid equestrian. So my question is, I'm just so fascinated with the ties between when I lecture to groups about bioindividuality and looking around the areas that people live in and how compromised are they and what modalities they need. And that could be taken into the spa down to, I love the fact, the little details of maybe not plastic water bottles, eco-friendly bottles, instead of Gatorade doing the coconut milk. So my question is, why is it, and maybe you have addressed this because I hadn't had an opportunity to on earlier, why is it that we see that the European countries and a lot of places I visited over the world, the spas are so integrated and in tune and so much more ahead of us here in U.S. So that's my quick question, and I'd love to have you as a guest on my podcast, Keep It Dirty, which is about grounding with Mother Earth. So thanks, Just.
Thank you, Leslie. That's good on your grandma as well. It's, I appreciate that. I think there's a lot to what you said. I'll start with this, that I think time has a lot to do with everything in our lives, right? Time has a pretty tremendous impact. And the reality is, if we were going to put things on a timeline, the spa industry in the States and really in North America, South America, is an infant compared to the spa quote unquote industry in Europe and in Asia. And so I think there's just from the time standpoint, there's been more opportunity for the idea of spa and the things that are related to that word. We can use that very generally right now to infiltrate the daily lives of people. Also, having been around for so long, those practices came about at a time when there wasn't a lot of competing parts to people's lives, I guess is maybe a way to say it, right? So your health was extremely important because it was how you moved day to day. And especially in old Europe, in Asia, these countries where there was a lot of agricultural um, lifestyles and those types of things, you had to take care of yourself in order to survive. And so a lot of the spa practices that have grown up in those areas came from your kind of real life healing everyday activities. Whereas by the time spa kind of took root here, and I would say that was really in the maybe early 90s. I mean, before that, it was pretty much an outlier. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but it was a pretty major outlier. So, around the 90s, you start to see more spas in the way that we see them today developing. And a lot of those were not in necessarily large facilities. You started to see a lot of kind of mom and pop type things, little day spas, maybe some holistic doctors who tagged on some alternative healing to their practice, that type of thing. And so the emergence of spa came into it at a time when our society was all about convenience. It was all about shortcuts, right? We were constantly looking for ways to do things faster and cheaper and all of those types of things. Coincidentally, that's also when all our health began to decline. 1980 forward is where you see the biggest decline in health. And that's, again, probably because of all these shortcuts we took, all of the manufactured foods and things. But so I think there's a correlation there in what you're saying. Just the nature of where spa grew up in this country, we weren't positioned that well to be integrated into a daily life. And that's why, again, through the 90s and into the 2000s, you saw spa as an amenity in hotels and resorts. You saw it as a luxury. Outside of that, when you did it, it wasn't necessarily for your health. It was to go relax. We changed some of that during 2001, during 9/11. After that, there was a little bit of a shift, but it's sort of come back again to being a little bit of a luxury. And so it's sort of this constant battle to make it about our personal health and those things. And when we achieve that kind of headspace, I think some of the things that you're talking about will come along with it. We'll be more cognizant of the impact ecologically and sustainably, both from a world standpoint, the world around us, and also from internal, our own kind of person. And I'm a little bit ADHD, if you all haven't noticed. So if I got way off track on that, just reel me back in. But I think I answered your question.
Leslie, do you have a
Thank
follow-up
you.
question? Anything else you'd like to ask Just before we move on?
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, what Just is saying is really, hitting the nail on the head, just reflecting on like the Turkish baths that's been around for how many years and years. And it was more affordable to the average person. And I think here in the States, we equate spa to, luxury. You need, a higher disposable income to be able to afford that. So it would be really cool over the years if we could just kind of reset that frame, just like healing our whole body, not just taking care of our face and lotions. It's all of our body, just eating healthy and everything. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Please continue to be on stage. So I want to say hi to Leah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing the post, and anybody else who are listening in the audience. Thank you so much for resharing the post. It really helps. So Leah, do you have a question, or would you like to contribute to this conversation?
Yeah. Hey, Jason. Hi, Just.
Hey, Leah.
Hey, great to listen. So I have a big dream question because I know you're such a huge innovator and icon here in the States for design and spa concept, and that is true, everybody. So big dream wise, with sustainability in mind, my question for you is, what if you had a carte blanche for a new build? What would be the top three implementations or amenities or concepts that you would implement today?
That's a good one. Appreciate it, by the way, Leah. Always complimentary. Um, yeah, I top of mind, very first thing that came to mind when you said that is closed loop. Um, Many years ago, I got to go to a coffee plantation in Costa Rica, and I was working on a spa concept in San Jose, so in a very urban environment. We went out to a rural area and went to this coffee plantation, and they talked about this closed loop cycle that they had when they operated it. And I didn't quite understand what they meant. I sort of did, but I also was skeptical because people always say things like that. But it was literally closed loop. Everything that they grew, everything that they used was from that property. I mean, obviously they brought in some tractors, some machinery, things like that. But in terms of once the infrastructure was set up, they grew everything they needed and they used everything they grew. And so to the point where when they're harvesting coffee, all of the cast-offs from that process, whether it's the old plants, the leaves, etc., those were used for fuel to run the roasters that roasted the coffee. They grew bananas adjacent to all the fields because there's a reciprocity that I didn't know about, but between banana plants and coffee plants. And so there was a way that the banana plant fed the soil that enhanced the coffee, that made it grow faster. And everything that they did, every step that we went, they used all of um, I hesitate to call it the lumber, but the different pieces of wood and things that they gained from either the banana plants or these other plants that they had there. That's what they used to build the facilities. They used the banana leaves for the roofing. It was just remarkable to see how everything there served a purpose. They had no trash. That was stunning to me as well, because it's a big place. There was no trash anywhere because they didn't have anything that was trash. All the water they drank came out of crocs, out of a spring and things like that. And so closed loop, if I was looking for the Elysium of design, that would be it, whether it was 100% or 90% or 50%, but in some way finding a development strategy where you utilized as much of the resources that you use in multiple ways over and over again. And we did when I was a kid and I worked at 10,000 Waves in Santa Fe. We did the same thing. That was a Japanese bathhouse in the mountains, and we were on a well. It wasn't hot springs, and so water was really important and expensive, and it wasn't easy to get. And so when we would drain those tubs every Tuesday, we would drain all of these tubs. When they first opened, all that water just basically went back into the ground or down the road. We started to develop other mindsets, and the owner created a wetlands across the street. And so every time we would drain, it would refill that wetland. And within 6-7 months, we had crazy amounts of different birds that we'd never seen, cranes and things. And so it's really just that. If I could find a way to utilize all of the things that we know we're going to use anyway, water, electricity, air, all of those things, and find a way to recycle it and regenerate it and repurpose it. So that was one thing, not three, but I think that's where I would be at.
All right. So I appreciate that very, very much. Leah, do you have a follow-up question you'd like to ask? And please do not hesitate.
Well, just curious, because I do like to ask friends in the industry this. If you weren't 35 plus years into all of this by now, what would you be doing if not spa and design?
Well, if I could go back and I could actually move, I would be playing baseball. That's all I really wanted to do when I was a kid, even in high school and college. But yeah, I would either be doing that or if that wasn't an option, I think some type of nonprofit. Yeah, just giving
That's
back.
awesome. I didn't know that. Thanks, Jess.
That is
Yep.
super cool. Playing baseball. All right, all right, all right. Okay. So, Leah, please continue to be on stage. I have something called as a rapid fire question, which kind of involves all participants on stage. Now, before we get into that, just, again, back to your bio, the one which you shared with me. Okay. Now, I asked you a question: what great resources that help you along the way? And I love this answer a
Mhm.
lot. Really stood out. Two specific quotes which you mentioned there. The first one is, "Happiness is amazing. It is so amazing that it does not matter even if it's yours or not. A society grows great with when an old man plants trees, the shade of which they know they will never sit in." This is the first one, which I would like you to explain. And the second one, which you said, your personal philosophy: life without risk is a long wait in a long line to nowhere. So, help us understand this. Help me and my listeners get a sense of what you're trying to say here with these quotes.
Well, that first quote has been around forever. And the last time I heard it, where it really stuck out to me, was on that TV show, Afterlife.
Afterlife.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so in that, Ricky Gervais's wife has passed on, and he's contemplating life and whether he should continue living and these kind of things. And there's a woman that he's befriended who's also lost her husband, and she tells him, happiness is amazing. It's so amazing that it doesn't matter if it's yours or not. And then she continues, a society grows great when old men plant trees, the shade of which they know they'll never sit in. And so to me, that's sort of two things. One thing is that first part I feel is definitely true. When you see happiness around you or joy, unless something really bad is happening with you right that moment, it tends to make you feel better. And I love seeing people happy. And so I think that's just kind of the innate nature of human being for most of us. Joy is joy. And then the second part of that is about legacy. And it's about knowing that whatever you've done will make an impact, whether you get to see the impact right now or not. If you have that in mind when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, then you kind of have already received your reward. And maybe you'll be long gone when it actually has the impact or it's meaningful to somebody, or maybe you're not around when it's meaningful to somebody. But you did it, and you gifted it to them. So those are kind of two things that really guide my trajectory. And the other one is funny because I came up with that when I was a real little kid. I think I was like 8 or 9 years old, seriously. And I don't remember the context, but I have it in one of my journals that I used to write when I was a little kid. It's there, and it always stands out to me. And I simply wrote on the top of this page, life without risk is a long wait in a long line to nowhere. And I don't know what I was feeling at that moment, but probably maybe I was scared of doing something new or whatever. But the
it,
reality is, if you never try anything new, what are we doing here? Just keep spinning our wheels. So to me, I
it is
think you have to
simple
do
and it makes absolute sense if you ask me. It's simple, just like Simple Lotus, simple, it does make sense. So, so, so if you're wondering, guys, what is Simple Lotus, is actually Justin's website. Just's website is simplelotus.com. You should be able to find this link. I keep calling you Justin because my brother's name is Justin.
it's
So
okay.
that's why I keep
Most
calling.
people call me Jason, so we're good.
All right, all right. So, let's do some rapid fire questions. Okay, I'm just trying to find the sound effect for rapid fire. So,
These are fun.
all right, maybe it was not loud enough. So, let me just increase the volume a bit and retry that. All right, so rapid fire questions. Okay, I'm going to ask you just a few questions. I know we are kind of short on time, and I have one common question for everyone on stage. First question: if hospitality industry had a mascot, what do you think would be the most sensible one to have, and why do you think that should be the case?
All right, I'll start. I think it would be Mr. Magoo, because we're all well-intentioned, kind, and a humble community, but sometimes we're a little bit blind, and we wander around kind of feeling our way without any real roadmap or sense of direction.
All right. So Mr. Magoo, guys, it's a fictional character, cartoon character. Just Google this up. You should be able to see this. I Googled it myself right now. So I appreciate you sharing that. That is super, super cool. All right. Next question. Now, if you could create a spa treatment inspired by a famous comedian, who would it be and what would that involve?
Oh, 100% would be Gallagher. I'm not quite sure how I'd make that work, but probably something along the lines of an audience sitting in like a hammam space with a bunch of ripe watermelons sitting on a plinth, waiting to be slammed and splattered all across the room. Let that watermelon juice cover the skin, maybe add some hydration. Uh, then let them go and steam it off and finish up with a nice, maybe watermelon scented body souffle. So Gallagher.
That's super cool. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. One more question and then we will go to the common question for everyone. Okay. If you could have any person living or dead, okay, as a spa development, okay, somebody who can help you with the development process, who would you choose and why?
Oh man. Okay, I didn't think of that question.
If not development, let's take it as a
No,
guest. Okay, let's take a
no,
spa.
that's a good question. That's a good question. I think it would either be um, Frank Lloyd Wright, just because I love the way his mind works, or the way I think or perceive his mind working, or William McDonough, who's also an architect, and he wrote a book called Cradle to Cradle. It's about kind of designing products and facilities that can be used over and over again. So one of those two guys.
Awesome. That is super cool. Okay, now this is one common question for everyone on stage. Okay, let's say this is your break day and you have to go to your spa. I'm guessing all of you guys who go to a spa would definitely have like a spa day playlist. Is there a specific song which you like and you always want to listen to and relax? What is the name of that song or the artist? So I'm gonna start with the last person who joined. So let's start with Leah and then we go backwards. So Leah, would you like me to repeat that question?
Hey, Jason. No, I got it. So if we're talking about a spa day,
Uh huh.
yes,
Uh huh.
I think anything with Soul Rising, SOL Rising. This guy is a really cool yoga type composer, and I could just listen to all of his albums. It would probably take an entire day. I think he has like 8 or 10 albums, and just put that in my earbud and let it roll through. Just really relaxing, really nice sounds that will keep your head in the right zone of restoration and relaxation. So yeah, Soul Rising is great.
All right. Okay. That's really cool. I'm gonna check it out today after I finish the show. Soul Rising. I'm gonna definitely check this out. Thank you, Leah. I want to ask Leslie the same question. So, Leslie, do you have like a specific song which you kind of use on your relaxed days, spa days?
I love it. Okay, so this is going to age me because it's a composer, and I don't know if many people remember, and I don't even know if he's still on tour, but Yanni. Yanni, are you
Yeah.
familiar with?
The piano guy?
We are.
Oh, you remember? You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not that old, but yeah,
I
still.
mean, just amazing. So, not a specific song, but the composer, and that's my answer.
That is super cool. That is super cool. So let's ask Cheryl. Cheryl. So same question. Do you have a favorite band, artist, whoever you listen to on your spa day?
One that I just added to my relax playlist is an artist called Kathleen, and she does a great rendition of Pure Imagination from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And so on my relaxed days, I use that to brainstorm, and I think that that's my newest addition.
Nice.
That is nice. You said Kathleen. I'm gonna check that out. Kathleen. Okay. All right. Okay. So just your turn. Okay. Hit it.
I can't be simple. I'm all over the board. I think I would be very eclectic. So maybe start with "So What" by Miles Davis and finish with Silent Lucidity by Queensryche, something like that. I relax differently.
All right, all right, all right. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, we have to wrap up the show in about 6 minutes, guys. So just what I would like to ask you is that is if there's anything you want people to take away from this conversation, one thing you feel would benefit everyone, what would that takeaway be?
Micro influencing. I just think that sometimes we all want to do more than is realistic when doing something is enough, or at least it's a good start. And so when we talk about, in this case, sustainability, just start with yourself and then try and influence from there and keep building your circle. But you have to start where you have influence. And so a lot of questions today were, kind of about how we work with others or how we convince others. And honestly, if you don't convince yourself first and kind of get that root down, you're not going to have much luck after that. So I think just starting, what's important to you, start with that. Don't worry about what's important to everybody else, and just kind of work from the center out.
That is super cool. Micro influencing. All right, so I want to give you the opportunity to promote your business. So the name of your business is Simple Lotus. That's a website, simplelotus.com, SIMPLE lotus.com. What is your company's vision and where do you see yourself in, let's say, in the next 5 years from now? It's not an interview kind of question. What I meant to say is that where do you foresee, what kind of development and changes you see or you want to implement in your organization as you grow?
Yeah. I don't trade on my brand all that often. I do a lot of work with some consistent partners. Cheryl and Leah are familiar, and Gio, who was here earlier. Um, but when I do work as Simple Lotus or as myself, uh, it's really just about making an impact. It's just about taking something, whether it existed already or doesn't, and creating something extraordinary. And I can do that in anything. I've done a lot of, this is focused on sustainable spas, but I've done a lot of things. I went to architecture school. I was an executive chef for a number of years. I graduated culinary school. I was in the military. I've done a lot of different things. I worked in retail. I've done a bunch. And so it's my company is all about vision. It's not necessarily about spa and wellness. That just happens to be the niche um, that people let me play in. And so that's why I'm here. But the reality is, vision works anywhere. And so my abilities to kind of connect things and to see where things might go, um, sort of anticipate trajectories and stuff. That's what Simple Lotus is about. That's the type of work I like to do. And I'll do it pretty much for anyone, anywhere. Um, so that's the simple answer.
Awesome, awesome. Could you help my listeners understand who would be an ideal client who can reach out to you and can get benefit from your expertise? So you just help us understand so that the right people can reach out to you, take advantage of your expertise, and you can help them in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll put Cheryl on the spot. She was a perfect client because she's curious and she's ambitious and wants to do new things and kind of stretch her perspective and her mindset. I worked with Cheryl years ago when I was with a different company, and she was one of our clients. And then we've worked together since. But uh, it's those types of clients. Anybody who feels like stretching. I'm not good at maintenance necessarily. Like I'm not going to make some little incremental change. Nothing wrong with that. I think that's extremely important. I'm just not very good at it. So if you're looking to do something new, or you're looking to explore, that's sort of my ideal candidate. I work well with people that are either that way or have somebody on their team that would work with me that is that way. So a lot of vision.
All right, all right, all right. I appreciate you giving Cheryl's examples to illustrate your point. So, I wanted to actually quickly make an announcement before we wrap up the show. So, the thing which I like to make an announcement is my good friend Thomas is down in the audience. He usually never misses any of my show, but due to the time zone difference, especially after daylight saving started, it's been a big challenge. To compensate that and to help people out from different continents, I'm going to be making a minor change to the show timing starting from season 5. So, starting from season 5, we would be moving the time from 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be migrating that to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To give you the difference in context, so that will be, if I move the time to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it will be 8 p.m. BST, and I think it should be 5 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So in this way, I think we should be able to bring more people and listeners from other continents and other countries to tune in when we do our live shows. So I hope, Thomas, that gives you a peace of mind and you will not have to struggle with your sleep when you have to listen to my shows in the long run. Okay, I hope that helps people. The next thing which I want to highlight is about our next week's show, season 4, episode 24. Can mental disorder be a superpower, with Zach Sandler? Zach Sandler is a close friend of mine. He had a recent TEDx speech also on the same subject matter. I'm going to interview him next week, September 20th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to stick to the same time period till the end of this season and migrate to the newer time period starting from January onwards. So if you're interested in RSVP, if you're interested in participating for that event, I have highlighted all the details under the event notes. You should be able to find it. If you're on LinkedIn, come to my profile. You should be able to find all these specifics and details. I wanted to thank Just personally for giving me the opportunity once again to learn from you, understand, gain more knowledge about the hospitality sector. This was pretty cool. Just thank you so much. I love you all. Have a nice morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're in the world. Please take care of yourself, guys.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone.